to Senator Van Hollen for presiding over these nominations. It's an important task that we ask all of our members on both sides of the aisle to engage in, so I appreciate your willingness to do it. Let me congratulate all the nominees before us today. We want to thank you and your families for your commitment to service to our country, because it really truly is a family affair. And so we appreciate your willingness to serve the nation. These are critical posts that we need to carry out U.S. foreign policy abroad, and I hope we will be able to work through your nominations both at the committee and on the floor in a reasonable time so we can get you to the posts. Let me go to just a couple of questions. Mr. Libby, one of the most challenging issues on the ongoing peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan is the rights and security for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. I have deep concerns that without robust international guarantees, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh will be extremely vulnerable. What do you see as the different possible outcomes for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, and do you share my concerns about their physical safety as well as their protection for their cultural rights?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the question. I do share your concerns about the future of that region, including the people in Nagorno-Karabakh. That's why I think Secretary Blinken has really put his shoulder to the wheel to try and come up with and facilitate a settlement. And the good news is that, for the moment at least, all of the parties seem to be engaging seriously. It's not going to be easy, but a settlement that we want to reach and we want to help them reach is one that addresses issues of sovereignty, rights and security for all the people in the region, and territorial integrity. With regard to the situation of Nagorno-Karabakh, I don't necessarily want to prejudice what that looks like. That's a matter for the parties to decide. But a situation in which their rights and securities have not been considered or are not factored in and taken care of in some fashion strikes me as something that would not be durable.
It's for the parties to decide, but we clearly have a role in trying to advocate the process forward. I am deeply concerned by the ongoing blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh, which severely limits the basic goods and aid entering the region. Azerbaijan's more than 180-day blockade has threatened famine for the local Armenian population, causing rationing, resulting in pharmacies running out of medicine. Will you publicly condemn the blockade today and unequivocally urge Aliyev to open the Lachen corridor to normal traffic?
Sir, the U.S. position on this has been, it really consists of sort of three elements. And the U.S. has criticized any unilateral action that hurts trusts, raises risks, or damages people's safety and security. The way to approach this is really three elements. First, over the short term, that's to monitor the situation and continue our calls and pressure for the restoration of civilian and commercial traffic into and out of the territory. In the medium term, we're looking at questions of assistance. We don't have access to the territory at the moment, but my understanding is that the U.S. government has already put forward $21 million of food assistance, medicine, medevac, and family reunification assistance. That's a medium-term solution or a medium-term tool to address it. But the long term really is going to be in the context of a settlement, an agreement between all the parties that stipulates how the rights and securities of everyone in the region are.
Well, let me just say we can monitor it while people die. That's not satisfactory to me.
If people are dying, that's a big problem, and we need to take action.
People are dying.
Yeah, this is why.
So I urge you to engage with the department in a more forceful, forthright response, because having a corridor closed to humanitarian assistance, even our humanitarian assistance, is having difficulty getting in. That's because Aliyev. And so, you're going to be nominated, you're going to be going, if confirmed, to a challenging post. But the fact that it's challenging doesn't mean that the United States should not be speaking out for the basic human rights principles that we observe globally. And I hope you'll be a vigorous voice in that regard. I'm going to send you some follow-up questions. I'd like to see your answers to them.
For sure, Senator.
Ms. Biswal, in the President's FY24 budget request, there's a proposal for $2 billion to create a new revolving fund for equity investments at the DFC. While I agree that the DFC's ability to deploy equity is an effective yet underutilized tool for us to compete with China around the world, many of my colleagues have expressed concerns with pursuing this revolving fund through mandatory spending and outside the normal discretionary appropriations process. Now, I recognize you're not at the DFC yet, but how important is this mandatory spending proposal to the DFC's strategic plans?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. I think there are many different ways in which Congress may choose to address the issue of equity financing at DFC, whether it is through a change to the scoring, whether it is through creating the revolving fund as is in the President's budget request, or the total amount of exposure allowed to DFC to be able to lean in more to equity financing. I, if confirmed, would be willing to work with Congress to determine the most appropriate measure that Congress would feel comfortable with in order to enable DFC.
What happens, whether it's the mandatory funding that I understand the administration is seeking, or some other process that you suggest, if we're not able to get DFC's equity tools off the ground?
Mr. Chairman, I believe DFC will continue to advance financing to the best of its abilities with the tools that it does possess. I believe if we find a way around the equity challenges, it will allow DFC to lean in much more, particularly in more high-risk environments which are unable to take on additional debt financing, which I think is commensurate with the intent of DFC that the BUILD Act had.
Well, I don't want to overstay my welcome here. I'm going to follow up. I know. Can I? Yes. Oh, okay. All right. Because, you know, my dear and distinguished colleague often comes to these hearings. He doesn't get to ask this question in a timely fashion, so I don't want to impinge upon it. Can I have another minute? Thank you. All right. Development finance is an important tool to realize U.S. foreign policy objectives, and they can be especially effective in countering the malign influence of China and other adverse nations. Most developing countries would prefer to work with the U.S. and our private sector partners as opposed to the PRC's predatory development financial institutions. The DFC's strategic foreign policy objectives and focus on advancing development are mutually reinforcing and part of your role, if confirmed, to evaluate and articulate how the DFC is selecting deals that achieve both outcomes. So this is why I'm getting into how we're going to fund the DFC, because in part that will speak to what we're going to be able to do. How will you work within DFC's balanced development and strategic outcomes to its investments?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the dual mandate that Congress imbued DFC with to both advance our strategic goals and objectives and to ensure development impact are very important and mutually reinforcing. If confirmed, I would work, drawing upon my own experience working both within the State Department and at USAID, to help identify ways in which we can advance development impact in ways that are aligned with our very important strategic goals and objectives, particularly as we seek to provide a more compelling alternative to the state capital provided by some of our strategic competitors, which does not often advance the interests of the countries which it is financing, unlike
Final
our
question
programs.
for the moment. How do you believe DFC's proposed reorganization will achieve that dual mandate?
Mr. Chairman, if confirmed, I would work with DFC to help align the organization around the mandates that have been conferred upon it by Congress. As we have seen DFC transition from OPIC to the Development Finance Corporation, increase in both its budget and its staff, I believe there is an effort underway to look at what kind of realignment internally will help it better achieve its mission and mandate. And if confirmed, I look forward to working to further that process.
We need DFC to play a bigger role if we're going to compete with China. I have questions for both you, Mr. Libby, as well as the other nominees. As I always say at our hearings when I preside over them, I would urge you to answer them expeditiously when you get them and fully, because if not, what will happen is a member will come back and say, you really didn't give me an answer. So up front, I want you to know that when you get questions, you should answer it fully and expeditiously, because then we can consider you at a business meeting. Thank you, and thank you, Senator Romney, for your courtesy.